My name is Aaron Dells, and I've been a licensed hunting guide in the Rocky Mountains for 15 years. I've led everything from elk archery trips in early September to late season mule deer hunts through waist-deep snow. I've dealt with clients who couldn't read a compass, who froze up at the sight of their own blood after skinning their first buck, and one who insisted that the mountains were haunted after hearing a cougar scream. I've handled it all with the same rules: stay professional, stay alive, and bring everyone back in one piece. Last October, I took a job that I almost turned down. It was supposed to be a simple 5-day guided hunt near the northern edge of the Rockies, close to the Canadian border. The man who booked it was named Mark Penfield, a corporate lawyer from Denver with 2 friends, Brett and Clive, both from the same city, all in their late 30s. They wanted an authentic wilderness experience, which usually means they want to shoot something big, get a few photos with it, and go home bragging about their brush with the wild. Still, I needed the paycheck. Guiding in the Rockies isn't a year-round guarantee, and after a slow summer, 5 days of paid work meant rent and fuel through the winter. Mark had insisted on a remote area, a basin called Cold Creek Hollow, about 30 miles off the highway and reachable only by horse trail. I'd scouted it before. Elk move through there during the rut, and the ridges are steep enough that you rarely see another camp. The weather can turn ugly quick, though. Wind rolls in off the divide and settles in the hollows like a living thing. When I met them at the trailhead, my first impression wasn't great. Mark was dressed in brand new camo, the kind you buy because it looks tactical, not because it breathes right. Brett had a rifle still tagged from the store. Clive looked nervous just being outside cell range. I asked the usual questions: rifle calibers, hunting experience, medical conditions. Brett said he'd hunted white-tail once in Texas, guided of course. Clive said he'd shot skeet. Mark just smiled and said, "That's why we've got you, right?" I loaded our mules, checked their packs twice, and we started up the trail. The first day was long. The air had that early fall bite, but the ground was still soft under the horses. We made camp on a flat above the creek, where spruce trees broke the wind. I showed them how to pitch their tents and dig a fire pit. Mark filmed most of it on his phone like he was shooting a documentary. I tried to ignore it. That night, we sat around the fire eating freeze-dried stew. The 3 of them talked about Denver real estate and golf courses. Every so often, one of them would ask me about bears. I gave honest answers: yes, there are grizzlies here. No, they don't usually come into camp unless someone leaves food out. Have you ever had one come close? Brett asked, eyes wide in the firelight. Close enough, I said. Close enough to remember what their breath smells like. They laughed nervously, but it wasn't a joke. I've had bears circle tents before. They make no sound you can predict. One moment, the forest is still, and the next it's breathing behind you. We turned in early. I lay awake for a while, listening to the wind shift through the trees. The forest was quiet in that heavy way it gets before snow, where every sound feels like it's traveling too far. The next morning, I woke them before dawn. Mark complained about the cold. Clive said he hadn't slept. Brett asked if I'd heard the howling. I told him it was likely coyotes, though the sound carries strange in those canyons. By noon, we'd spotted our first elk, a cow and 2 calves crossing a meadow a few hundred yards out. The men got excited even though we were after bulls. I pointed out tracks, scat, rubs on trees. They nodded like students, but their attention drifted. Late in the afternoon, we found prints that made me pause. Deep impressions, long stride. Too big for a black bear, too narrow for grizzly. Could have been a large male wolf, but wolves rarely travel alone. Clive noticed my silence. Something wrong. Probably just an old print, I said. Ground soft. Hard to tell what's fresh. We camped again near the creek that night. The wind had died, but the woods felt different, heavier, quieter. The usual forest sounds were missing. No squirrels chattering, no owls. Just the steady trickle of water and the occasional crack from cooling trees. Sometime around midnight, I woke to footsteps outside my tent. Soft, careful. Not the kind of movement you hear from a deer or elk. I reached for my rifle, thumbed off the safety, and waited. The steps stopped. Then I heard the faint metallic click of something brushing against one of the tent poles. "Mark," I whispered. No answer. I sat there holding my breath for what felt like a full minute. Finally, I heard the crunch of retreating steps, slow and deliberate, heading toward the creek. I got out quietly, rifle in hand, and scanned with my headlamp. Nothing but mist and trees. In the morning, I checked around camp. No clear prints, just the soft churn of our own boots and the mule hooves from yesterday. The guys joked about me being jumpy, but I noticed Mark kept glancing at the tree line while he ate. We broke camp and moved higher into the basin, setting up near an old ranger cabin that hadn't been used in years. The windows were boarded, but the roof held. It made a good landmark, and I told them if anything went wrong, they could always find their way back here. That afternoon, Brett and I glassed the ridges for movement while Mark and Clive fished the creek. I caught sight of a herd a mile out. A dozen cows, one bull. Good size, moving slow. I marked the draw on my map. When the others came back, Mark looked pale. He said they'd found something down by the water, an old camp. We went to check it out together. About 50 yards downstream, we came across a collapsed tent half buried in silt. The fabric was torn and mossy, the poles rusted. A few scattered items lay nearby. A boot, a cooking pot, a crushed lantern. Looked like it had been there for years. But there was something else. A tree with claw marks carved high up, nearly at eye level. Whatever made them had stood tall. Clive muttered, "Bear, right?" "Maybe," I said, though the spacing was off. Too even. Mark took a photo, then another. "We're gonna have one hell of a story to tell," he said. That night, no one talked much. The fire burned low. Around 2 in the morning, I woke again, this time to a sound like distant breathing. Not snoring, not wind. A rhythmic inhale and exhale just beyond the tents. I sat up, listening. When I turned on my light, the sound stopped. By morning, frost covered everything. Brett swore he heard someone walking around again, but none of us had seen footprints. I checked the mules, restless but unhurt. Their behavior told me more than anything else. When animals go quiet, something's off. We packed up to move deeper into the drainage, closer to where I'd spotted that bull. But something in me had shifted. I kept glancing over my shoulder a few minutes. I'd catch the faint echo of movement. A crunch, a snap, then nothing. By the 4th day, it wasn't just me. Mark stopped filming. Brett kept his rifle loaded even in camp. Clive said he wanted to head back, but Mark insisted we stay. "We've come this far," he said. "We're not turning around because of a little noise." That evening, while setting snares for rabbits, I found a fresh track in the mud beside the creek. Bigger than any I'd seen before. Heavy, with a human shape, heel, arched toes, but wrong somehow. The stride was long, as if whoever made it had been running. I measured it with my knife, nearly 14 inches. Deep like something carrying weight. I didn't mention it to them, just smoothed the mud over with my boot and walked back to camp. That night it came closer. By the 5th morning, the forest no longer felt like a place we were passing through. It felt like a thing we were inside of. The air was sharper, thinner. The light came slow and gray through the spruce, and every sound bounced too far before dying. We woke to find the creek iced over at the edges. Brett said he dreamed something was breathing beside him again. He laughed when he said it, but his eyes didn't. I checked the mules and found one had tugged its lead rope halfway through a tree trunk during the night. That kind of panic doesn't happen for no reason. The animal had sweated through its coat, nostrils crusted with frost. When I untied it, it kept its head low, ears pinned, eyes darting toward the timberline. We were supposed to climb higher that day, to a ridge that looked down on a meadow elk favored in the cold. Mark wanted it. He said he'd paid for the real hunt, and that meant no turning back. I should have said no. The snow clouds rolling off the divide said it for me. Still, by mid-morning we were climbing. The slope tilted steep, shale underfoot, patches of ice in the shadows. Clive lagged behind, muttering that his boots weren't made for this. Mark led with a confidence I didn't trust. He stopped often, scanning the trees through his scope, though I doubt he knew what he was looking for. At noon we reached a plateau where the timber thinned. You could see the basin below, miles of dark forest, the creek curling through it like wire. That was when Brett froze. Movement, he whispered. I followed his gaze. At first I saw nothing but trees. Then, maybe 60 yards off, something slipped between them. A shape, upright, fast, no color. No clear form, just motion. Probably a deer, I said. No deer moves like that, Brett muttered. The wind carried a scent I didn't like, metallic, faintly sour, like blood left too long in the sun. We waited, rifles raised, but nothing came back. After a minute, Mark lowered his gun and laughed. You two are jumpy as hell. He started forward again, brushing past a tree, where bark had been stripped down in long, clean lines. I ran my fingers over them. They weren't claw marks, too straight, like something hard had dragged down, not cut but peeled. We pressed on another mile before setting camp on a narrow flat just below the ridgeline. The sun was gone by 4. Clouds hung low, the kind that promised snow before dark. I built the fire larger than usual. Flame means comfort in the backcountry. It draws the eye and usually keeps predators back. Usually. We ate in silence. No jokes. No talk about Denver. Just the crackle of wood and the wind moving through the high branches. Sometime after, I walked a short ways from camp to check our perimeter. I carry an old headlamp with a dying battery. Its beam cuts in a weak yellow circle. I was halfway to the tree line when I caught sight of something lying against a stump. A glove. At first I thought it was one of ours. I picked it up. It was stiff, soaked through, and old. The kind of weathering you get from more than a winter. The fingertips were shredded. I turned back toward camp and stopped. There were prints in the mud behind mine. Not animal, not quite human. Wide at the heel, deep, spaced far apart. They stopped just before the tree line, pointed toward me. I felt the kind of fear you don't admit to until later, the kind that hits low in your stomach. I walked back slowly, never turning off the light. When I got to the fire, Mark was pacing, rifle in hand. Thought I heard something, he said. Upslope. Heavy. Brett stared at the dark. Maybe a bear, he said, though no one believed it. That night, the snow came. It started as a whisper of flakes, then thickened until the world shrank to the glow of our fire. I sat first watch. The others tried to sleep. I could hear them shifting in their bags, pretending. At some point, near 3 in the morning, the mules started braying. Low and guttural, not panic yet, but warning. I went to calm them, hand on my rifle, light sweeping through the snow. There, beyond the coral of rope and saplings, stood something. A shape just outside the reach of the beam. Too tall for a deer, too narrow for a bear. It stood still, watching. I raised the rifle halfway, blinked, and it was gone. I waited until dawn to tell them. By morning the snow was 6 inches deep. The men looked worse than before. Clive said he hadn't slept at all. Brett's hands shook lighting the stove. We packed early, aiming to drop down toward the cabin and maybe make the trailhead by the next day. But the snow had buried the path. Landmarks blurred. The forest looked different, tilted somehow, every ridge wrong. After 2 hours, I realized we'd looped. "We're past this tree already," Brett said, kicking at the trunk. He was right. My knife mark was still there from the day before. I tried to keep my voice steady. "We'll correct course. Give me a minute." I pulled out my compass. The needle twitched, then spun. Clive noticed. "That's not good, is it? Could be iron in the rock," I said, though I'd never seen it behave that way out here. We backtracked toward the creek, or where I thought it should be. Midway down a draw, Brett stopped dead. "Aaron," he said quietly, "look. In the snow ahead, clear as writing, were footprints. Bear, human. They came from the trees, crossed our path, then turned uphill. The steps were deep, toes splayed, no sign of drag or stumble. Whoever made them had walked steady through snow cold enough to kill bare skin in minutes." Mark laughed once, sharp and brittle. "You're kidding me." I crouched beside them. The snow at the bottom of each print hadn't melted, which meant they were recent. An hour, maybe less. We followed them without agreeing to. Some instinct pulled us. Curiosity. Maybe fear disguised as reason. They wound up toward a narrow cut in the ridge, then vanished near a cluster of boulders. There was a smell there again, faint but strong enough to notice even in the cold. Rot, or blood, or both. "We're going back," I said. "Now." Mark wanted to argue, but his voice caught halfway out. I didn't wait. I turned downhill. The others followed. The light dimmed fast, the kind of dim that comes before a storm. By the time we reached flatter ground, wind had picked up, erasing our tracks as we made them. Back at camp, we found one of the tents torn. Not slashed, ripped from the inside. Clive dropped to his knees and started repacking his geeple. "I'm done," he said. "I don't care what direction I'm leaving." "No one's going anywhere until this weather breaks," I said. "You walk out now, you die." He glared at me. "Something's out there." "I know," I said. The storm lasted through nightfall. We sat close to the fire, every pop of the wood making someone flinch. At some point, Mark began to talk, softly, mostly to himself. "There's no one else out here," he said. "You said that, Aaron. No camps for miles." "That's right." "Then who the hell?" He trailed off. No one answered. After midnight, the wind fell dead. Silence came back heavier than before. Then, from somewhere behind the tents, we heard the crunch of snow under a slow, deliberate step. Another, then another. Brett raised his rifle. "Don't," I whispered. The steps circled, stopping at the mules again. The animals groaned, hooves shifting. I moved closer to the fire, watching the shadows. The sound stopped. A moment later, something hit the edge of camp, a soft thud. A shape dropped into the light. It was the glove I'd found earlier, frozen solid, standing upright where it landed. I stepped forward, picked it up. Inside was a torn scrap of fabric. Army surplus, a name patch still attached. The letters were faint, but I could make out the first one. M. Mark stared at it too long. His own initials. He didn't say a word after that. The fire hissed, the wind shifted again, and somewhere out in the timber, a single branch broke. We didn't sleep. By dawn, the fire was nothing but ash and steam. The snow had stopped, but fog rolled in off the creek, so thick you couldn't see past 20 feet. Everything looked bleached and soundless. Mark sat on a log with his rifle across his knees, still staring at the glove. Brett was pacing, muttering under his breath, and Clive had retreated to his tent and zipped it shut like a child hiding under covers. I made coffee, though none of us drank much. The air felt wrong, dense, charged, like waiting for a gun to go off. We're heading out, I said finally. Pack light, keep the mules close, and don't talk unless you have to. No one argued. Even Mark just nodded. He looked smaller somehow, his swagger gone. We moved out by mid-morning, following the creek down. I recognized landmarks I'd passed before, but they came in the wrong order. First a bent spruce I'd marked on day 2, then the old ranger cabin that should have been miles beyond it. The compass was still useless. I told myself it was fog playing tricks, but that kind of talk only works when you believe it. Around noon we stopped to rest. Clive said he felt watched. He kept turning in circles, eyes darting through the mist. I didn't tell him I felt it too. That was when the first shot went off. It cracked the silence clean in half. One sharp report from somewhere up the ridge, not ours. Everyone hit the ground. "Hunter," Brett whispered. "There aren't any others out here," I said, and the words came out too fast. We waited, hearts thudding. Another shot rang, farther off this time. Then nothing. Mark stood up slowly, eyes wild. "Someone's playing with us." "No," I said. "That wasn't at us. Might be echo from the valley," but he was already turning, scanning the ridge with his scope. "There's somebody up there. Put the rifle down." He didn't. His finger trembled near the trigger. "You're not hearing what I'm hearing," he said. I didn't argue. I just kept us moving, pushing through brush until the creek curved sharp east. The fog began to thin, revealing tree trunks slick with melt and patches of old snow. We found prints again. This time, they weren't single steps, they circled. Around trees, around rocks. Around our own tracks from earlier. Like something pacing, testing distance. Brett bent to study one and flinched back. "Jesus. That's blood." He wasn't wrong. Thin lines of it, frozen dark in the snow's crust. Not much, but enough to raise questions. We didn't talk about it. We just walked faster. By late afternoon, I saw smoke in the distance, thin, gray, curling up behind a rise. Relief hit hard. "That's the old ranger station," I said, half a day early. Mark wanted to run, but I made him slow down. "You rush, you make mistakes," I said. "We do this clean." When we reached the clearing, the relief died. The smoke wasn't from a chimney. It was from a tree stump, still smoldering black, surrounded by a ring of ash. A fresh fire, less than a day old. There were boot prints around it, and not ours. Big, heavy soles, deep enough to fill with water from melting snow. Whoever made them had been here recently, maybe hours ago. Clive started shaking his head. "No, no, no. Quiet," I said. We searched the area, careful, slow. Found a few scraps of cloth, a spent rifle casing, and what looked like the corner of a torn sleeping bag buried under brush. Nothing else. The forest around us held its breath. Brett whispered, "You think whoever it was is still close?" "Maybe," I said. Mark's voice came low. "What if they're following us?" I didn't answer. We camped there because we had no choice. The fog thickened again by evening, and travel in that soup was suicide. I built a small fire, just enough for heat. The others huddled near it, rifles in their laps. Sometime after dark, I heard it again. Footsteps, but not one set. Too slow, unhurried, moving through wet brush. They stopped just outside the glow of camp, close enough I could hear fabric shifting. I held up a hand for silence. Everyone froze. Mark mouthed something at me. "Beer." But I shook my head. The steps circled once, then faded into the fog. When I finally slept, I dreamed of the glove. Not the one I found, but hundreds of them, nailed to trees, fingers pointing downhill. I woke before dawn, sweating under the cold. The fire had gone out again. The fog was gone too, replaced by a light so clear it felt cruel. That's when I noticed Clive's tent was open. "Clive," I called softly. No answer. His pack was gone. So was his rifle. Brett cursed under his breath. "He left. Looks that way." Mark stood there, jaw tight. "He's gonna get himself killed, maybe," I said. Or maybe he already saw something we didn't. We followed his tracks until the sun came up. They led north, weaving through brush, down toward a low ravine where fog still clung to the ground. Halfway there, the prints broke off into a scatter. He'd started running. Then they just stopped. No drag marks, no sign of struggle, no blood. Just stopped mid-slope like the ground swallowed him. We searched for an hour. Found nothing. After that, no one wanted to speak. We turned back toward the main trail. I tried to keep the pace steady, but my sense of direction was gone. The terrain folded on itself. Every ridge looked like another. Around midday, we heard movement again, closer this time. Heavy, steady, matching our stride. "Don't look back," I said. "Just keep moving." Brett looked anyway. His face went white. "Aaron," he whispered, "there's someone behind us." I didn't turn. "Describe." "Tall," he said, wearing dark clothes. Just standing there. When I finally risked a glance, there was nothing. Just trees. We didn't stop again until sunset. The mules were near collapse, legs shaking under their loads. We'd burned through most of our food and half our nerves. That night, I kept the fire going high. Mark sat across from me, eyes red. "You ever seen anything like this?" he asked. "Nope. You think it's a person?" "I think it's something with a plan." He nodded slowly. "Then we're not the hunters anymore." The wind came up then, dragging smoke sideways through camp. I turned my head and froze. On the far edge of light, half buried in snow, something gleamed. I went to check. It was a camera. Trail cam style. The casing was old, scratched, but the red light still blinked faintly. Brett came over, eyes wide. "Where'd that come from?" "It wasn't here before," I said. "I pulled the card and pocketed it. Whatever was on it, we'd check once we were safe." That word, safe, felt like a lie as soon as I said it. We packed before sunrise, determined to find the main trail. The fog didn't return, but the air felt hollow, like the mountain itself had gone quiet to listen. By mid-morning, we found something I wish we hadn't. Clive's rifle leaned against a tree beside the creek. Barrel clean, safety off. His gloves were folded beside it, fingers lined up neatly. No footprints around. Mark started laughing, too loud, too long. It wasn't the kind of laugh you recover from. Brett grabbed him by the shoulders. "Stop. You're scaring the mules." Mark tore free, voice shaking. "You don't get it, man. We're not leaving. None of us are." I stepped between them. "You both shut up and keep your eyes open." We moved again. The light faded. The forest stretched wider than it should have. Near dusk, I heard water again, rushing stronger than before. The main creek, maybe. Relief flickered until I saw what blocked our path. A dead elk. Fresh kill. Torn open at the belly, ribs pried apart. No bite marks I could identify. No scavengers, either. Flies shouldn't have been out in that cold, but the air hummed with them. Brett turned and vomited into the snow. Mark stared at it for a long time, whispering something I couldn't make out. When I asked, he didn't answer. We left it there and pushed through the last of the light. By nightfall, we reached a rise overlooking the valley. I saw no sign of the highway lights, just endless dark trees and the narrow silver of the creek wending north. We made camp in a hollow between rocks. No fire this time, just cold food, silence, and the wind. I checked the camera card under flashlight, using my phone's reader. The screen flickered, then loaded. Dozens of images, all from the same angle. The edge of a camp, a fire, us. Each photo was a little closer. The last one was taken from behind my tent, and in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was the reflection of an eye. We didn't speak for a long time after I showed them the photos. Mark stared at the screen like he could will the image to change. Brett swore under his breath. a steady rhythm, like it might keep something away. I deleted nothing. Whatever that thing was, I needed proof. By dawn, I made the call I should have made 2 days earlier. "We'll head straight for the ridge," I said. "Once we hit the line of pines, we'll follow it west until we find the trail." No one disagreed. The silence between us was its own kind of contract. The mules moved slow, hooves punching through crusted snow. The forest had gone dead quiet again, the kind of quiet that swallows your breathing. I kept counting steps, just to keep my head from sliding into panic. After an hour, we crossed a dry wash where the snow thimbled. That's where I saw the first set of new prints. Fresh, clear, walking parallel to ours. Same length, same spacing as before. Human-shaped bear. Brett saw them too. "He's tracking us." "Or pacing," I said, keeping distance. Mark stopped beside me. "You keep saying he? What if it's not?" I looked at him. He wasn't asking out of superstition. He was asking because the evidence didn't line up with anything he knew. "Doesn't matter what it is," I said. "It's out here, and it's not scared of us." We pressed on, but the air had changed. You could feel the watching now. Not just behind, everywhere. Around mid-morning, the fog started drifting back in. Not rolling down from the ridges, just blooming out of the trees, like smoke rising backward. I could barely see the mule in front of me. "Stop," I said. "Don't move." Shapes formed in the mist. Tall trunks, yes, but also something between them. Motionless. Vertical. Brett lifted his rifle. "You see that?" "I see it," I said. "Lower your gun." We waited. The shapes didn't move, didn't breathe. The fog folded, and they vanished. We started walking again. Slower this time. I felt the pulse of the mountain under my boots, the faint tremor of meltwater running somewhere deep. By early afternoon, we reached the ridge. The wind hit hard, cold, clean, with the kind of force that stripped the fog in seconds. The view opened below endless spruce, gray sky, and a glint of the highway far beyond. It should have been a relief, it wasn't. Down in the basin through the trees, thin columns of smoke rose in 3 places. Mark saw them first. "There," he said. "Campfires. Could be," I said. 3, Brett asked. "Who the hell?" "I don't know. The fires weren't big, just enough to mark space. Like signals. Like someone wanted us to see them." "We keep west," I said. "We don't go down there." But as we turned, one of the smokes thinned, then went out, as if whoever made it knew we'd seen. The next half-mile was the hardest of my life. The ridge narrowed, sheer drop on one side, forest climbing on the other. Every sound set me on edge. The creak of saddle leather, the brush of branches. Then the wind shifted, and we caught another smell: burnt meat. Mark gagged. Christ. We found the source near a stand of pines. A campfire burned down to embers, the remains of an animal strung beside it. What was left of a mule, hide blackened. Head missing, one of ours. I recognized the saddle tag. Brett turned away. "That means someone's been following close enough, too." "I know what it means," I said. Mark stood motionless, eyes locked on the carcass. "It's not a person," he whispered. "A person wouldn't waste meat." "Keep your voice down," I said. "We move. Now." The fog was creeping back thinner here, sliding through the trees like low smoke. Every step felt heavier. We dropped into another drainage as light faded. The snow was softer here, older, streaked with melt. The creek we'd been shadowing appeared again, looping through deadfall. That's when we heard it. A scream. Short. Cut off halfway. Human. We froze. Brett whispered. "Clive, it was impossible." He'd been gone for more than a day. "Stay here," I said, already moving. Mark grabbed my sleeve. "You go, we're split again. Then keep me in sight." We followed the sound toward a stand of firs, pushing through brush that clawed our legs. The air stank, Iron, sweat, rot. We found a clearing not 50 yards wide. In the center stood another fire ring, still smoking, and something else. A coat hung from a branch, torn. Familiar. Clive's. Brett made a sound low in his throat. That's his jacket. Stay back, I said. I walked forward, every sense screaming. Under the coat, nailed into the tree with a hunting knife, was another trail camera. The same model, the same red light blinking slow. I pulled it free, pocketed it. Then Mark hissed. Aaron. Behind the fire, on the far side of the clearing, the snow was disturbed, like something had been dragged. 2 parallel grooves leading into the trees. The fog was thicker there. The light dimmed. Something cracked a branch deep in the timber. We ran. No pretense of quiet, no strategy. Just ran until the world blurred. By the time we stopped, lungs on fire, we'd lost the trail again. The ridge was gone behind us. The fog swallowed the sun whole. I turned on my GPS beacon. No signal. Mark fell to his knees, gasping. We're done, he said. We're already dead. Not yet, I said. Then tell me what's hunting us, he shouted. I don't know. The echo hit the trees and came back wrong. Late, low, too slow. We set camp where we stopped. Not for rest, but because none of us could move farther. The mules were gone now, vanished during the run. The forest felt close as skin. I checked the new camera card with shaking hands. Same sequence. Dozens of stills, each showing our own camp. The last one was taken in daylight from the ridge above us. We were all in it. Except one of the shapes wasn't any of us tall. Narrow, barefoot. Mark saw it and whispered, He's learning. What do you mean? He's getting closer every time. I didn't correct him. We slept in shifts that night. Though sleep is the wrong word. The dark came in waves, shallow and mean. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard snow shifting, the creak of something heavy leaning against a tree. Just before dawn, Brett woke me, eyes wide. Aaron, listen. At first, nothing. Then, voices, 2, maybe 3, carried on the wind. Too far to make out words, but close enough that I could hear cadence. Calm, steady, conversational. We crouched, rifles ready. The voices came from downslope, moving parallel. Then one of them laughed. It wasn't human. Not quite. Too long between breaths. The sound faded. Brett whispered, That wasn't? Don't finish that sentence, I said. We packed in silence, moving west again, hearts beating like trapped things. By late morning, the fog burned off completely. Blue sky, sunlight cutting through frost. For the first time in days, I could see distance again, and that's when I spotted something ahead, across a narrow clearing, half hidden behind fallen timber. A truck. White old Park Service issue. The kind used before they switched to green stripes. I almost didn't believe it. Shelter, I said. We sprinted. When we reached it, I knew immediately something was off. The hood was cold. The doors unlocked. Snow piled inside through broken windows. The driver's seat was empty, so was the bed. But the glove compartment hung open, a map folded on the seat. I picked it up. The top corner bore a name scrawled in faded ink. Penfield. Mark froze when he saw it. That's my name? I know, I said quietly. He stared at the truck, at the frost gathered along the windshield. That's not possible. The snow around the tires was packed down hard. Fresh tracks leading out toward the tree line, barefoot again, heel deep. I looked back at him. You ever been here before, Mark? He didn't answer. Just kept staring, lips moving, as if trying to remember. Brett said, What's going on? I folded the map, slid it into my coat. We're leaving. Now. But before we moved, I caught sight of something in the distance. Up on the ridge, just where the tree line broke, a figure stood watching us. Tall. Still, I lifted my rifle. The figure stepped backward and vanished into the trees. The wind hit again, carrying that same scent. Metal cold. Blood and smoke. and beneath it, faint but clear, the sound of breathing. We didn't talk as we left the truck. There wasn't anything left to say. Every sound now felt like it carried weight. Boots on frozen soil, breath fogging in the cold, the faint jingle of rifle slings. The forest had lost its color. Even the spruce looked gray. I tried to keep a heading west, but the ridges twisted in ways that made no sense on the map. We'd crest one hill expecting to descend into the next valley, and instead find another wall of stone waiting for us. By noon, we stopped beside a deadfall to rest. Brett sat against a log, hands trembling around his canteen. Mark stood apart, scanning the tree line. He hadn't spoken since seeing his name on that map. "You all right?" I asked him quietly. He nodded once. "That truck, it was mine. Or it looked like mine. Same plate, same dent in the fender. But I sold that years ago." "Maybe you're remembering wrong." He shook his head. "No. I still have the bill of sale in my office." His eyes didn't look crazy, but they didn't look sane either. Just hollow. I didn't press him. We moved on when the wind picked up. It carried with it a new sound. Low, distant, metallic. Like something dragging. Brett stopped. "You hear that?" I did. "Could be the creek shifting ice." "Could be," he said, but his hand tightened on the rifle. The noise came and went, never closer, never gone. Around 3 in the afternoon, the light dimmed to that strange silver you get before a storm. The temperature dropped fast enough to bite. I spotted a cut through the trees ahead and led us into it, hoping it might bring us back to open ground. The path narrowed, hemmed in by rock walls slick with moss and ice. The sound of the wind died completely. That's when we found the rope. It was stretched between 2 trees across the path, taut, almost invisible against the snow. A snare-line, thick-braided cord, meant for trapping, not animals. "Too high." Mark reached out, fingers brushing it. "It's warm," he said. "Don't touch it." I snapped, but too late. He jerked his hand back, hissing. "Cut myself." I checked his palm. A shallow slice, but clean. The kind of cut you get from fresh wire, not rope. Brett looked around, scanning the trees. "Who sets wire like that way out here?" I didn't answer. Whoever did, they'd been here recently. We stepped over it and kept moving. My stomach had that sinking weight again. The same feeling I'd get years ago, before a storm hit a hunting group and I had to make the call to turn back. That quiet, certain dread that tells you something's about to go wrong. The cut narrowed, the trees pressing close. Then Mark froze. He was looking at the ground. Boot prints again. Not ours. Fresh. Coming from ahead this time. He knelt, hand hovering above one. "Aaron. These are." "I see them." They're wearing boots now. That detail hit harder than it should have. Whoever, or whatever, it was had adapted. We followed the prints out of the cut and into another clearing. At the center stood a lean, made from pine boughs and tarps, half collapsed under snow. Smoke stains on the wood. Someone had camped here not long ago. Inside, we found the remains of a bedroll, a tin mug, and a page torn from a hunting permit log. No name, no date. Just coordinates scrawled in pencil. Mark read them aloud. 40, 7 degrees 40, 2 minutes. I recognized the grid. "That's us," I said. "Right here." He looked up slowly. "Then who wrote it?" Brett whispered. "We need to get out." I agreed. We kept west until the sun dropped behind the ridges. Every few minutes, one of us would turn around, sure we'd heard something following. Footsteps soft and measured, matching ours beat for beat. At dusk, the snow began again. Fat flakes, quiet and slow. We set camp beneath a rocky outcrop, a poor shelter but better than open ground. The fire took longer than usual to start. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the lighter. Mark sat staring at the flames, his face hollowed by shadow. "Do you ever think," he said, "that maybe we already died back there? that this is what comes next. Brett barked a laugh that cracked halfway out. "Don't start that. I'm serious," Mark said. "None of this makes sense. The trails change. The weather's wrong. My truck's up here. Maybe this place." "Stop." I said it harder than I meant to. "We're not dead. We're lost. There's a difference." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the fire. We slept in turns again. I took the last watch, sitting with my back to the rock. The snow muted everything. Our breath, the fire crackled the world. Sometime near dawn I saw movement across the clearing. A figure at the edge of light. Tall. Stutching. I didn't reach for the rifle. I just watched back. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe. When I blinked, it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion. The mind's trick after too many nights without rest. But when daylight came, I found prints where it had stood. Barefoot again. They led to the trees and disappeared into the frozen brush. When Brett and Mark woke, I didn't mention it. There was no point anymore. We all knew we were being followed. Saying it out loud only made it heavier. By midday, we'd burned through our last food. The snow had stopped, but clouds were stacking low. I estimated 2 days at most before another storm. We reached a ridgeline that looked familiar. The same valley where we'd first seen those distant fires. I could almost make out the line of the old ranger cabin below, half swallowed by trees. "We're close," I said. "We hit that cabin. We'll find the old trail." We started down. Halfway there, the forest erupted with sound. Branches snapping, snow falling in sheets, something crashing through the trees toward us. "Run," I shouted. The mules bolted first, vanishing downslope. We stumbled after them, slipping, sliding on ice. The sound behind us was relentless. Thudding, breaking, like a body too heavy to move quietly. We hit the base of the ridge and ducked behind a fallen log, breath ragged. Then silence. Brett whispered, "What was that?" "I don't know." But I did know how it felt, like prey. When we finally crept out, the clearing was empty. No prints, no sign of movement, just snow. And then Mark said softly, "Where's Brett's pack?" I turned. It was gone. He swore. "You dropped it." I didn't. We searched for an hour, circling back through our path. Nothing. By the time we gave up, the sun was gone again. We reached the old cabin near dark. The roof had caved more since we'd last seen it, and one of the doors hung loose. But it was shelter, and we needed walls more than pride. Inside it smelled of mold and ash. The floor was damp, warped. Someone had carved words into one of the beams, half rotted, but still legible under soot. "Saus H. Fidi Est." I traced the letters with my glove. The grain felt soft, as if freshly cut. Mark whispered, "What does that mean?" "I don't know." We built a fire anyway, the irony not lost on me. The warmth felt almost unnatural now. Brett sat in the corner, arms wrapped around himself. "I keep thinking," he said, "about those photos. The ones from the camera. What if he's not following? What if he's hurting us?" The word hung in the air. Mark muttered, "Then he knows where we'll end up. Outside." Something shifted against the wall, light enough to be wind, heavy enough not to be. We froze. The boards creaked again, this time near the window. I raised my rifle, sighting through a crack in the frame. Nothing but dark. Then a face appeared. Not pressed close, not sudden, just there, like it had always been part of the window. Pale, hollow-eyed, mouth open as if mid-breath. I fired. Glass shattered. The face was gone. Smoke filled the cabin from the shot. My ears rang. Mark and Brett scrambled, shouting questions I couldn't hear. When I stepped outside, the snow was unbroken. No prints, no blood, only silence. I lowered the rifle slowly. Behind me, Mark said, "You missed." Maybe. We didn't rebuild the fire that night. We just sat in the dark, each of us staring at a different corner of the room. waiting for dawn that felt like it would never come. When light finally crept through the cracks, Brett was gone. His rifle, too. No signs of struggle. No prints again. Mark stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the empty space where Brett had been. Then he looked at me and said, almost calmly, "It's just us now." I nodded. For now. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile you give when you've already accepted something you shouldn't. "You think we'll make it?" I didn't answer, because by then, I'd started to wonder if the mountain wanted us to. By the 6th morning, the world had shrunk to white and breath. The fog returned thicker than ever, wrapped so close around the cabin that it felt like standing inside a lung. Every sound was muffled. Even our boots sank without echo. Mark hadn't slept. He sat by the door, rifle across his knees, whispering to himself. I couldn't catch the words. I'd seen fear before. Men freeze at cliffs, go pale at the sound of a charging bear. But this was something slower. His mind wasn't breaking all at once, it was unspooling, thread by thread. We had to move. "Pack up," I said quietly. "We follow the creek out. If we keep it on our right, it'll take us toward the road." He didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes glassy. We left what we couldn't carry: pots, rope, one bedroll. The fog made it impossible to tell direction, but I trusted the flow of water. Creeks don't lie. The sound of it came faint through the mist, trickling under ice. I followed that sound until the ground began to slope. Half a mile in, I realized something was wrong. The water was flowing uphill. Not much, just enough that my boots told me before my eyes did. I stood there staring, trying to make sense of it. The creek climbed a gentle rise, vanishing into white. Mark came up behind me. "You see it too?" "Yeah." He laughed once, low. "Then it's not me losing it." We didn't talk about it again. We just followed the ridge instead. By midday, the fog thinned. The forest changed with it, pines giving way to aspen, trunks pale and narrow, like bones standing upright. Wind whispered through them in uneven bursts, not quite language, but close. Mark asked, "You ever think about how big this place really is?" "All the time." He nodded. "Feels like it doesn't want to end." "It does," I said. "Everything ends." He smiled faintly. "That's what I'm afraid of." We walked until the light began to shift. Dusk in the mountains doesn't fall. It climbs, starting from the valleys, eating upward until it's at your boots. That's when we saw the cabin again. Same roof, same broken window, same carved beam with the words "Stay do your techi fiardies." I stopped cold. Mark walked past me into the doorway. "We never left," he said. "That's not possible." He turned toward me, expression flat. "You said that about a lot of things." I went inside. Everything was as we'd left it. The spent casing from my shot still on the floor. The ashes cold. It wasn't déjà vu. It was the same place. I checked my compass again. The needle spun once and went dead, stuck between north and nothing. That was the first time I felt something like real panic. Not the quick burst of adrenaline when a bear bluffs or a storm turns. This was deeper, the kind that makes your hands go numb. Mark said, "Maybe it's a circle. Maybe it's supposed to be." "We'll keep moving," I said. "Where?" "Downhill." He didn't move. I left first, cutting through the trees until I heard him following. The fog lifted for good by late afternoon. We found ourselves in terrain I didn't recognize. Not spruce, not aspen, but a scatter of stunted pines over open rock. The sun burned dull orange through cloud. We stopped near a dead mule. One of ours, ribs exposed, eyes gone. It hadn't been here before. Mark crouched beside it, touched the saddle strap. "He's close." "Don't," I said. "He wants us to see this." He stood, staring off into the timber. "I can hear him breathing." "Listen to me," I said. "There's no one here. You're hearing wind." He smiled, slow, almost gentle. "You keep telling yourself that." That's when he raised his rifle. At first, I thought he was pointing it at the trees. Then I realized it was at me. "Put it down," I said. "You're leading me in circles," he said. "You know where we are. Mark, we're both lost." He shook his head. "No. You keep looking back like you're waiting for something. You knew from the start. I'm trying to get us home." He stepped closer, barrel leveled at my chest. "Woo's home." The silence after that was thick enough to choke on. Then, from somewhere in the woods, a branch snapped. Heavy, deliberate, Mark turned his head toward the sound, and I moved. I hit him low, knocking the rifle sideways. It went off once, wild, echoing through the trees. He fell hard, and the gun skidded into the snow. We both froze, listening. Nothing. Then another crack. Closer now. I grabbed the rifle and hauled Mark to his feet. "Run." We didn't stop until our lungs burned. When we did, we were in another hollow, ringed with stone. The sound behind us faded, then returned slower. Mark collapsed against a boulder, gasping. He's following us. Then we keep him behind. He looked up at me, eyes wide. "You think that matters?" I didn't answer. We camped there because we couldn't go farther. No fire, just a chemical hand warmer between us. The cold pressed in from every direction. Around midnight, I woke to a sound. Not footsteps this time, but scraping. Metal on wood. I turned. Mark was gone. The rifle too. I went out into the dark with only my headlamp and knife. The beam caught the snow, the trees, nothing else. Then, 30 yards away, I saw movement. Mark, standing beside a trunk, staring at something I couldn't see. Mark. He didn't turn. I went closer, boots crunching. He was murmuring under his breath again. When I reached him, I saw what he was looking at. A row of branches lashed together, hanging from the tree, like a crude wind chime. Each branch carved with letters. Mine. His. Brett's, Clive's. All burned into the wood. The air went still. Mark whispered, "He wants us to stay." I grabbed his arm. "We're leaving. Now." He didn't move. "You don't get it. There's nowhere else." I pulled harder, but he tore free. "You go ahead," he said. "I'll catch up." I didn't argue. I just ran. I followed the slope down until the trees thinned and the wind came back. The cold bit through my coat. When I finally stopped, I turned and listened. No footsteps. No voice. No shot. Mark was gone. For the first time in my career, I didn't feel like a guide. I felt like the hunted. I made camp beneath a ledge, no fire, no light. I wrapped myself in a tarp and watched the dark pulse in and out like the tide. Every time I blinked, I saw those names swinging from the tree. Sometime before dawn, I heard something move through the snow. Slow, careful, approaching from behind. I didn't reach for the rifle. I just waited. The sound stopped beside me. Then a voice, low, calm, close enough to feel on my neck. "You shouldn't have come back." I spun with the light. Nothing there. Just prints already filling with new snow. Barefoot. When dawn came, it didn't look like light anymore. Just a dull gray that pushed the dark back a few feet and stopped. I sat against the rock until my body went numb, waiting for warmth that never came. There was no sign of Mark. No sound but the wind crossing the ridge. I told myself he'd kept moving, back toward the trailhead, maybe even found a way out. But every direction looked the same, and the snow had filled in every print but mine. I followed the creek again, not because I believed it would lead me anywhere, but because moving kept me from listening to the silence. The trees opened, closed, opened again, like a breath I couldn't catch. After an hour, I found the mules. 2 of them half buried near the creek bank. They'd frozen standing, eyes iced over, reins still tangled around a root. Their packs were torn open. Not eaten, just destroyed. My spare radio lay in the snow beside them, its antenna bent, the battery compartment pried off. Someone had taken the batteries. I crouched there for a long time, trying to think of a reason that wasn't the one waiting in my head. When I finally moved on, the day was half gone. The sun hung low and white, no warmth in it. My legs felt carved from stone. I tried to track by habit, looking for direction in moss, slope, wind, but the rules didn't apply anymore. The compass still spun. The ridge lines folded back on themselves. I began recognizing trees I'd never seen. Late afternoon, I spotted a trail marker nailed to a trunk. Weathered, half-rotted, but the number was clear. 13. There were only 12 in this region. I stood there until my breath slowed. The marker was fresh, nails bright. I thought of the glove, the cameras, the names carved into wood. The mountain wasn't repeating, it was recording. I followed anyway. Maybe out of defiance, maybe surrender. The path narrowed through pines and bent downhill, steep and slick. By the time it leveled, the light was gone. I could smell smoke again. The cabin appeared through the dark like a memory. Same place, same door half open. I didn't go inside. I just stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at it. The wind moved through the broken boards, making that low, rhythmic sound. Half sigh, half whisper. Then I saw him. Mark sitting by the dead fire. Rifle across his knees. Head bowed. I called his name. He didn't answer. I took a step closer. The snow shifted under my boot and he looked up. His face was pale, lips cracked, eyes gone wide and flat like glass. "You made it," he said. His voice was raw, the kind that comes after screaming too long. "What happened?" He smiled. "You were right. Everything ends." His rifle was empty. The bolt drawn, chamber bare. He must have fired it during the night. "Who were you shooting at?" I asked. He looked past me, toward the trees. "He doesn't need to hide anymore." I turned. The forest stood still, every trunk identical, every shadow stretching toward us. When I looked back, Mark was holding something out. The camera. "I took it from the tree," he said. "You should see what's on it." I didn't move. He pressed it into my hand anyway. "It keeps taking pictures," he whispered, "even when it's off." Then he stood, walked past me, and disappeared into the fog. I called after him until my voice went hoarse. No answer. Just the wind. Inside the cabin, I found one of the bedrolls still laid out, half, covered in frost. My hands shook as I slid the memory card into my reader. The screen flickered once, then loaded. Frame after frame of the cabin, each from the same angle, the doorway, the fire pit, the place where Mark had been sitting. Then the next frame, me, standing behind him, hand on his shoulder. I dropped the device. The screen stayed lit, cycling through the same image again and again. I left the cabin before the next picture could load. Outside, the fog had thinned. The moon came out in pieces through the clouds. I followed the slope downhill, no longer caring about direction. My only thought was movement. At some point, I realized I could hear footsteps again. Not behind me, beside me, keeping pace. I didn't look. The forest opened into a wide clearing I didn't remember crossing before. At the center stood a burned-out truck. White. Service logo long gone, paint bubbled and cracked. The smell of gasoline hung heavy. My knees gave out before I reached it. I recognized the plate. Mark's truck. But not wrecked, not old. The engine was still warm, inside. On the passenger seat lay the same map I'd found earlier. The pencil marks were darker now. Lines crossing, looping, circling back. A single word written in the center. Sty. I folded the map and stepped back. Something shifted in the trees behind me. The sound of snow compressing under slow weight. I raised the rifle, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then, through the fog, a figure emerged. It moved like it knew the ground, steady, patient, deliberate. Taller than Mark, broader at the shoulders, coat torn open to bare skin. I could see the breath rising from it, faint white clouds in the cold. It stopped a few yards away. We stared at each other across the dark. No words, no movement. For a moment, I thought I saw my own face staring back, older, worn, eyes sunk deep. Then it turned and walked into the trees barefoot. I didn't follow. I don't remember much after that. Just the feel of cold biting through my gloves, the way the air thinned, the way sound began to fade. I walked until the forest thinned and the snow turned to gravel. The wind grew warmer, carrying the smell of asphalt and diesel. When I stumbled onto the road, the first car didn't stop. The second one did. The driver said I looked half dead. Maybe I was. He called it in. Rangers, deputies, EMs. Questions I couldn't answer. They never found the others. Not the men, not the mules, not the cabin. Only my footprints, leading out of a valley that didn't appear on any of their maps. A week later, one of the investigators called me back. They'd developed a roll of film found in an old park service camera near the site. He said most of it was fog, static, exposure damage. Except for the last frame. It showed 3 men sitting around a fire. One of them was me, and behind us, standing just at the edge of light, was another shape. Tall, barefoot, watching. He asked if I remembered taking it. I told him no, but I remember the breath on my neck the night before, and I remember what it said. You shouldn't have come back.